Hello and welcome back to the Charity Shop Chat with myself, Mimi Cartwright.
And with me, Charlotte Greenwood. As always, this podcast is powered by the Charity Retail Consultancy, and we support charities with expert retail guidance, training, and strategic insight to help them maximise income and impact. And don't forget to sign up to Charity Retail Learning in conjunction with the CRA for practical sector-specific training designed for charity retailers.
So today's episode feels greatly significant because charity retail is not just small, it's not niche, it's one of the largest retail networks in the UK.
But movements like that do not organise themselves. They need leadership, they need coordination, and they need a voice at the table when legislation is discussed, when retail policy is shaped, when environmental impact is debated. And for many years, I think 11 years now, that voice has been Robin Osterley OBE. As Chief Executive of the Charity Retail Association, Robin has represented the interests of charity retailers across the UK. He's led national conversations on business rates, waste and recycling legislation, retail regulation and sustainability policy. He's helped strengthen benchmarking and professional standards and supported the sector through economic turbulence, regulatory change, the growth of e-commerce and the shifting expectations of modern retail, and also that little thing called COVID.
Behind the scenes in meetings most of us will never see, Robin has been advocating for charity retail to be recognised as not just a fundraising tool, but as a professional, credible and economically significant retail force. And now, as Robin prepares to retire as CEO of the Charity Retail Association, it feels like a very important moment to reflect, to acknowledge the leadership that has shaped where we are today, and to look ahead at what the next chapter of national leadership might bring.
So this is a conversation about legacy, advocacy and the future of charity retail. So Robin, welcome to Charity Shop Chat and thank you for the years you've given to this sector.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a very flattering introduction, and thank you for asking me to do this because it's great fun.
Yeah, I don't think you can have a charity shop podcast without having you on here. So let's get into it then. What made you want to become CEO of the CRA initially then?
Well, two things really. When I applied for the job, I was a really quite experienced person in the kind of civil society membership sector, which is a bit of a niche kind of thing. But I'd been running membership associations in world of charity and the third sector generally by then for about 20 years. And it came up, and then I thought, well, blimey, that sort of kind of might suit me. But also, I just happened to love charity shops. So that kind of felt like it was a really good fit. And I thought, well, if I can apply some of those skills, particularly running federations, because if you're running a membership association of individuals, that's a very different story from running federations, which is what I had done the whole time, by which I mean membership associations whose members are organizations or companies. And they're incredibly diverse. You get really huge ones, you get really tiny ones, you get lots of things in between. And that's quite a specialist activity actually, because they all need different things, and you have to apply your limited resources to members who are different shapes and sizes and have different requirements, and that's a really big challenge and one which I've always relished. So it just seemed like a really good fit. So I applied, and I was lucky enough to get it.
It's always good to hear that we've got male champions out there for charity shops, because a lot of the time you see thrifting influencers online are women. So it's great to see a male voice in the room to advocate for the sector.
Well, I guess I ought to be honest and say that most of the early time I was doing that, I was following my wife around. but having done that, as a result of doing that, I went to loads of charity shops and started to get really interested in what they were doing. So it was a genuine interest, yeah.
And so on that note, do you mind giving us a little bit of a brief summary of your career before coming into the CRA?
So, I started life after leaving university in sales of office equipment. The very first job I had was selling photocopiers, which was quite sort of uninspiring kind of thing to do, to be honest. But you need to eat. So I did sales, and then I moved into marketing in IT. And spent a lot of time with ICL, which was a very large computer company in those days. We're talking in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. Um, and there was a kind of morning, or perhaps a series of mornings, when I woke up thinking, I don't really want to be doing this anymore, selling stuff to people who probably don't want it. And even if you could persuade them to buy it, then it didn't work. Uh, the IT world was very different then to how it is now. And it was really hard to get any, positive outcomes out of it. So I moved into the arts actually at that point. And my first job in the arts was running a small record company, classical music record company. And from there, I moved into an organization which was then called the National Federation of Music Societies. It is now called Making Music, which is the largest membership association in the UK, looking after amateur musical groups. We had about 3,000 members, and that's where I sort of cut my teeth in terms of learning how to run membership organizations. So I did that for 16 years and had a year in sport, and then dished up in the CRA. So, three different careers really, I guess, two of which were in membership. So IT sales and marketing, and then membership in music, and now membership in charity retail.
So when you first became CEO of the CRA then, what was the sector like? And was it as you expected it to be, having been kind of coming in as an outsider's point of view?
That's a really interesting question because it wasn't what I'd expected actually. At least certainly when I first went for interview and started doing the research for my interviews, um, what I discovered was really quite unexpected to me. I thought charity shops, the be all and end all of charity shops, was making money for their parent charities, and of course that remains their principal activity, their principal reason for existence. But what I discovered as I got into the process of trying to get this job was the huge sustainability aspects of charity retail, and then more subtly the whole community hub thing, the way that charity shops act as a centre for huge numbers of people in their community in a whole variety of different ways. So, so the answer to your question is, I wasn't expecting those two things at all, actually, and it was extremely interesting to find out that. And I remember asking my interview panel, when they come to that point where they say, "Have you got any questions for us?" And I said, my question was, why is it that the public knows so little about the sustainability aspects of charity retail?
Great
And
question.
interestingly, no one was able to answer that question. So I thought, okay, well, if I get this job, this is going to be an interesting challenge.
First job on the to-do list.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. So, so it wasn't quite what I expected, really. What I think was what I expected was the great sense of common feeling, and the fact that everyone is working towards a similar goal, and the extent to which people are prepared to share with one another, tips and tricks, and well, much more than that in a lot of cases, whole huge pieces of documentation and all that kind of stuff, in order to make everyone's life a little bit better. And that's what I'd learned from my life in charities. It was a pleasant feeling to realize that everybody had those goals in mind.
That's great. Um, it's really interesting as I'm like coming into the start of my career in the sector to have such similar first glimpses in like a world that we live in where retail is so turbulent and so fast paced and ever changing. Really, it's really amazing to see that charity retail kind of stands strong as sustainable and as a community hub, because that are the two real reasons that I knew that I wanted to be in the sector.
It's the USP, really, isn't it? Well,
Absolutely.
USPs in this case. I think I think it would be odd if charity retail was just trying to compete constantly with, on the same playing field as, Marks and Spencers or Next or something like that. I mean, what kind of, it's almost what's the point about that, really? But if you're actually able to leverage those special things about community, and above all about improving the health of secondhand shopping in general, and the public's understanding of it and acceptability of it, then that's where you get your real difference from. That's what makes it stand out.
Absolutely. I completely agree. So as we're reflecting over your career and over your tenure, do you have any achievements that you are most proud of or that most stand out to you?
I think if you really force me to make a choice, because I mean, obviously there are so many millions of brilliant achievements, it's very hard for me to actually choose between one and the other. If you force me to make the choice, I think probably the thing that I'm most proud of is that 4 of the people who I employed and worked for me went on to become chief executives in their own right. Um, I have a very sort of, I hope my team would acknowledge this, but I have a very kind of uh, delegatory kind of style of management. I like people to get on with things themselves, really. And if they need to learn their trade, then hopefully I will help them do that. But I'll give them the space to do it so that they can become, experts in their own right. And try and keep out of their way while they're doing that development work. And I think that sort of works with most people. I guess it doesn't always work with everybody, but for most people, I think they appreciate that and they're able to thrive in that kind of environment and flourish. And the fact that 4 of my people went on to actually run quite substantial organizations in their own right, I think is probably the thing that makes me proudest over the course of that career. There's probably a few other things I could mention, but maybe we'll get on to some of that.
That is a great achievement, though, because you can see the impact that you've had on those people, and,
Yeah.
and you've passed on those skills and what they've gone on to do. So that's a great answer. Okay, so moving on then. Charity retail is a major economic and environmental contributor. Do you think it now has the level of recognition and influence it deserves nationally?
No, I don't. We are constantly having to put our hands up and say, "Oh, you remember us?" Uh, I mean, I don't think that's any fault of the sector, by the way. I think the sector is doing its best, and actually, I think it just reflects how charities in general are considered by the government and authorities. It isn't really it is considered a poor relation in lots of ways. And I'm not quite clear why that should be, because as everybody knows, there are some absolutely enormous charity retailers that dwarf quite a lot of commercial retailers in terms of their size and scale and efficiency, and all of that sort of stuff. Um, but they do tend to get ignored compared to smaller, perhaps slightly more glamorous commercial organizations that are out there making lots of money and making their proprietors or shareholders very, very rich. So I think there's still a way to go with that. I think it's probably better than it was. And I'm not saying that was down to me, but I mean, I think the whole thing has moved on quite significantly over the last 10 or 15 years in terms of profile, in terms of the acceptability of buying secondhand. And I do think that there are people in government who listen. And I certainly think that DEFRA, uh, department that we deal with most, Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, really actually does understand charity retail quite well, and the part that we play in the whole kind of facilitation of reuse. I think they do understand that quite well, and they've been very supportive, particularly since lockdown in lots of different ways. Um, so I think it is better than it was, but there's still plenty to play for in that respect, I think.
I think one of my favourite pieces of work that the CRA did was the social value.
Yeah.
Because anecdotally, everyone knows the value that charity shops bring aside from money in the till. But to be able to quantify that in that way, I think has been brilliant to talk about. People haven't seen that represented like that before. And what was it, £75 billion of social value?
75 billion, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
generated by charity shops, which is incredible. And I hope that, makes people sit up and pay attention to what charity shops bring to the high street and the economy and the communities.
Yeah, you'd certainly hope so. Yeah, it's a figure that's quite difficult to get across to people, exactly what's behind that figure and to help them understand it. And I mean, it's just a very, very big number, and it doesn't have a sort of um, uh, analog in the real world, really. But what you can do is you can compare that number with the kind of social value that other types of organizations provide. And if you do that, you see that charity retail is doing incredibly well in terms of providing that sort of those benefits for customers, donors, staff, and volunteers that really other organizations struggle to do because they don't have that immediate personal impact. If you go and work, I mean, just confine it to retail. If you go and work in any number of high street retailers, you're unlikely to come out of that at the end of the day feeling that you're a lot better than you went in. But I strongly suspect that a lot of our staff and volunteers, as well as donors and customers, absolutely do that. They'll come out of their working day. They'll probably be a bit knackered, but
A little bit.
but they will but they will feel that they've done a decent day's work in aid of a decent cause. And you're not going to say that if you are doing it in a commercial retail environment. So yeah, I mean, I think that underpins a huge amount of it for sure.
So when talking about the sector's voice and how we need more conversation around it, how has the sector's voice strengthened over the years, and which voices and demographics do you wish we could hear more of?
I think it's strengthened. Yeah, it's interesting you link that question to demographics, because I think actually the fact that it's strengthened is actually largely down to a sort of spreading of the demographic, particularly with regard to customers and volunteers. So when I first started 10 years ago, and again, I'm not saying it's anything to do with me necessarily, but when I first started 10 years ago now, we were still looking at quite an aged population of volunteers. And donors tended to be a little bit more diverse in terms of age. But you didn't get a huge number of young people donating in those days. And I think a lot of that has changed. And we now have quite a lot of young volunteers working in charity shops, actually, and a huge number of younger people donating to charity shops. And I think this has helped enormously to spread the word and to, I keep using the word normalize secondhand shopping. I mean, there's a really good example of this actually, and this I'm actually going to give a bit of credit to Vinted here. My son, who's 24, in June, would never set foot in a charity shop at all. He just simply wouldn't. And then he, like a lot of kids of his age, started to see Vinted as an opportunity to earn a little bit of money and to buy stuff that he could see really easily online and so on and so on. And having converted himself, 'cause there was no influence for anybody else, you just did it. Having converted himself to secondhand shopping in that way, he now is, a fairly regular visitor to charity shops, and he donates a lot to charity shops. So that just seems like a part of a pattern that we're seeing, really, which is that more and more young people in particular are doing this, and they're doing it largely for sustainability reasons. They don't need necessarily to do it for economic reasons, because there's plenty of sources of really cheap clothing out there, unfortunately, very low quality cheap clothing in a lot of cases, but there are plenty of sources of cheap clothing. So, why are these young people buying in charity shops? Because a lot of it is about sustainability. And they find that really important. They want their shopping choices to make less of an impact on the planet, and they want their hard-earned pounds to go to a good cause rather than some hedge fund in London. So, and I don't want to ignore the value of older people. I mean, I am one, so but it would be very senseless for me to do that. Clearly, it's hugely important that there are older people still buying and donating and volunteering in charity shops, and we love them equally. But it is really interesting to see the extent to which younger people are getting involved.
Definitely. And it's really interesting that you mentioned Vinted in that way, because a fair few of our conversations, I'd say, are Vinted becomes quite a difficult topic, because they have obviously noticed a hit in their donations because of the rise of Vinted. I know I personally have sold stuff on Depop and Vinted in the past, which means that I'm getting that money instead of the organisation I would donate to. However, I think it's really exciting to put Vinted in the light that you have, because it is true. My generation, Vinted is an algorithmic way to shop secondhand, which my generation desperately needs. Like, for some reason, we've decided like we need efficiency. We need to have everything so incredibly quickly, just because we've grown up in the age of social media, and so that is how Vinted comes in as. You can go on Vinted and you know you're going to be able to find exactly what you want, which is different to charity retail. But to know that Vinted has been a pathway into sustainability means that we're all on the right side of retail, even though we kind of cross over in parts. That's really interesting.
So you mentioned it before. How do you get the right balance when representing such a broad range of charities who may have different priorities? You've got your nationals with hundreds and hundreds of shops, and then you've got some of the smaller charities who only have one shop. How do you balance that with the CRA?
Well, I think you have to recognise that they need different things from us. The CRA was set up, as it then was, the Association of Charity Shops was set up in 2000 by a bunch of large charities, and primarily what they wanted was representation. They wanted a voice. They didn't feel that they could necessarily poke their heads above the parapet and start making a fuss around government, and because A, it was difficult for them to do so, and B, there were constraints, and there still are constraints on the extent the amount of lobbying that a charity can actually do outside of its own charitable objectives. And lobbying for retail outside of your would be outside of your charitable objectives. So by setting the CRA up, they gave themselves an ability to do that. And I think to a large extent, that's still what the largest organizations need. They need someone to go in to bat for them so that they're not so exposed when they're having these conversations.
Yeah.
Smaller organizations, by contrast, just want to know what to do in a lot of cases. They are not as well resourced. They won't have really extensive HR departments or IT departments. They want to know where to put their limited resources, and we can help them with that. So given there's only 10 of us in the organization, that is a challenge, but it's a challenge that we feel that it's really important to meet. I mean, an example would be that we set up, it was probably about 8 years ago now, our small retail chains activity, where we go around the country bringing really small numbers of shops, 1 to 10 shops together, around a table where they can talk to one another about their special problems. So I think the other answer to your question is that the way you do it is by mobilizing and utilizing your own membership, getting them to help, provide venues, provide speakers, talk to one another, give their opinions to one another. And that's how you grow from a 10-person organization to a thousands of person organization, because you've got thousands of people at your not exactly at your disposal, but who might be prepared to help under the right circumstances. So I think that's how you do it. But it is it's a constant challenge. And as I said earlier, it's one of the things that I find most interesting actually about running organizations like this, which is the way that you can adapt yourself to various different members and get the members to help you with that process.
So we've spoke throughout this conversation about sustainability. Do policymakers fully understand the environmental impact of charity retail, and how can we start to shout about that more in our retail spaces?
I certainly think that DEFRA does. The government who look after environmental and waste related and matters. I'd love to see more understanding of it with local authorities who are actually responsible on the ground for a lot of these kinds of sustainability issues. I mean, I have a degree. I may be unique in this, but I do have a degree of understanding for and sympathy with the local authorities, because they are so up against it in every single one of the areas in which they operate, that looking after charity shops better is hardly very high on their radar. But nevertheless, charity shops could be local authorities' partners in a much more constructive way if local authorities were prepared to listen and had the resources to actually make those partnerships happen. So, I do think there is, again, a lot more work that could be done there. And I think the people who don't understand, well, certainly, DCMS, who have overall responsibility for charities within the government, don't have a clue. In fact, they don't have a clue about many things, actually. But certainly charity retail will be quite low on their list. The Treasury probably, who control the purse strings and are very influential in where government, well, completely influential in where government funding goes. I don't think they get it very well. And as I say, local authorities who would be in the prime position to both help and be helped by charity retail. Some of them, there are good examples of local authorities, don't get me wrong, but most of them don't really feel that that's particularly significant. And there's an example of that, which is that fewer than 1 in 7 local authorities give the extra 20% discretionary rate relief to charity shops.
I didn't realise it was that low.
Yeah, it's getting lower all the time. Again, for understandable reasons, but you're kind of kicking the people that actually can really help you with some of these things.
I think you're right. I think, top down has got to happen, but, it's got to work from the bottom up as well. So we talk a lot about strategy and policy, but ultimately it does come down to people as well. So how important is investing in retail teams and leadership development, especially with everyone making cuts at the moment with rising costs? And what role do things like charity retail learning play in supporting that?
Well, to answer the first question first, I think charity retail learning, which we set up a few years ago in conjunction with the charity retail consultancy, you guys, um, has a huge part to play because for the very specific reason that all the courses that we do from charity retail learning are absolutely tailored to charity retail. It's not easy. It's not difficult to go out and find a course in, I don't know, merchandising or space management or something, but it's impossible to find one in space management and charity retail unless you look at the CRL timetables. So, I think that's been really helpful actually, and gives our members a really good and easy way of finding out stuff that is specific to them. And it's I think particularly in the frame here are shop managers. I think running a charity shop must be one of the hardest jobs in the UK. They're asked to do an incredible number of different things. Including being, in a lot of cases, unpaid social workers for volunteers. And the amount of support they get for those kinds of activities is more limited than I'd like it to be. But on the other hand, I'm not a charity retailer, and I don't have to juggle the resources of an organisation in order to provide those kinds of development opportunities. But I think whichever way you look at it, if you isolate your shop managers and just say, right, okay, just bring me the results at the end of the year and get on with it how you like, that's really a recipe for stress, actually. And the well-being of your charity retail staff is going to suffer. So I do think they need more support. We worked with an organisation a few years ago to do a survey of well-being in retail in general, and it turned out that actually charity workers in retail were actually slightly better in terms of well-being than their counterparts in commercial retail, but it was only a small effect. And I think a lot of charities should look very carefully at the way that they support their on-the-ground shop staff, develop them, and look after their well-being.
And that is partly why we set up this podcast. It was because not all charities can afford to send loads of people, loads of staff and volunteers to conferences and things like that. So the podcast really is a really accessible way for shop managers to get involved, to hear the knowledge that's being shared, get the tips from other charity shops and volunteers, and you can use it in your own time.
So as we begin to close down today's podcast, and as you prepare to retire from the CRA, it is now entering a new chapter. What challenges will the next CEO inherit, and what opportunities would you like them to make happen?
It just so happens that uh, there's a lot of change ahead, I think. In particular, what we've seen already is the extent to which shops are changing their own nature and often becoming quite a lot larger. In some cases, a few cases moving out of town centres into different types of locations where you can have bigger space, which is great, but where a lot of the community stuff that charity shops are so famous for is harder to achieve. So that's one thing. I think we are looking at a world where costs are going to be a problem for some time to come, if not forever. So there's going to have to, in order to maintain the profitability of charity shops to support their parent charities, there's going to have to be a real close attention paid to that cost versus income ratio and the profitability of the shop. And then on top of all of that, you've got AI round the corner. And the question is, how can that really be utilized to the benefit of charity shops and indeed to the benefit of the environment? Because AI doesn't come for free. It comes with an enormous power requirement. And it comes with some issues over, the way the data centers are run, with modern slavery being implicated and all those kinds of things. And these are things that are very much contrary to the ethos of charity retail and charities in general. So how do charities best leverage AI, which they are going to have to do, no question of it, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater and in that way. So I think there are a few challenges ahead for my successor. But I'm absolutely certain. So as we stand at the moment, at the beginning of April, when this recording was done, we have 70 applications for my job,
Oh,
which
wow.
is a goodly number.
70 people
Um,
want to be you, Robin.
no, no, I don't think so. I did tell them it was a good job. Hopefully we will get someone who's, bright enough and enthusiastic enough and energetic enough to meet all those challenges. And I'm sure we will. So it's a great time for me to be going and handing over to somebody else like that because there's lots of really good stuff for them to get their teeth into. And I won't have to do it.
Some very big shoes to fill, though.
Thank you.
So, just on a personal reflection, then, what has this role meant to you personally?
Well, when I joined, I wasn't sure that it was going to be my last job before retiring from full-time work, and it has proved to be. And the reason is I couldn't kind of get away from it because I've really, really loved the last 10 years. I wouldn't stop now if it wasn't for the fact that I'm turning into a bit of a dinosaur, and I will be 70 in 2 months. 2 months after I leave, I do sort of. I do feel that it has been a fantastic way for me to end my career, and it's been enormously enjoyable in all sorts of different ways. The diversity of each day, you wake up and you've got some rough idea of what's going to happen, but as a chief exec, you have to have a finger in a lot of different pies, and knowing that there's all these different things going to happen during the day, and I'm not just going to be doing the same thing the whole day has always been exciting for me. I mean, I've been a chief exec since 1997, so that's always been the same, but I think what's so great about charity retail, I mean, it's going to sound like a tremendous cliche, but what is so great is the people there that are doing it, their dedication, their fantastic resilience, and their creativity, and the fact that almost all of them could go out and earn twice as much in commercial retail or commercial, just industry in general, but they choose to stay doing what they're doing because of their love of the good causes that we represent, and that's humbling in lots of ways. I don't often call myself humble, but that does make me feel fairly humble, and I think that those have been my reflections. That the last sort of 10 years have been, well, yeah, the most enjoyable of my working life. And not everybody can say that actually, so I'm really lucky in the respect that I'm ending on a high, a personal high.
Yeah, I was literally just about to say that, ending on a high. That's always a great way to go out, isn't it?
Yeah.
So for those people who are here still representing the sector, if you could leave one message for the shop managers and the retail leaders listening today, what would that be?
You saved the most difficult question until last. I think my main message would be keep on keeping on. Actually, you are never going. We encountered 22 and 23 where everything 2022 and 2023 where everything seemed hunky-dory, that charity retail was doing fantastically well, unbelievably profitable. People were swarming in the doors as customers and donors. And then the October 2024 budget hit, and
Nightmare.
things changed significantly in people's attitudes. There's never going to be a time when there isn't change in charity retail, and there's never going to be a time when it's going to be, entirely straightforward. So the message is, you're doing the right thing by working in these organisations. Keep at it, and don't get disheartened by, those people who've been in the business much longer than me tell me that it is a cyclical business. There are good times and bad times. And okay, it might be slightly tough times at the moment. They're not as bad as they were last year, I think. It might be tough times at the moment, but there will be good times as well, because you are such a creative and resilient bunch.
I still have nightmares about that budget. We set our budget so high after those golden years, and then it was like, pull it back, pull it back. So what's clear from this conversation is that charity retail hasn't just grown in scale, it's grown in confidence and professionalism, and that doesn't happen without sustained leadership. So moments of transition are also moments of opportunity. At the Charity Retail Consultancy, we support charities to strengthen their retail performance and leadership so that collectively the sector continues to grow stronger. And when individual organisations invest in excellence, the national voice becomes more powerful too.
So, Robin, you think we left the hardest question to last, but this is the toughest. This might be the toughest of them all. We at the end of every podcast, we like to ask our guests to give a charity shop shout out. So this is just as a celebration to celebrate each other in the sector, bring each other up and talk about our unsung heroes, because there are so many in the sector.
No, I'm not going to do that.
It's like asking you to pick your favourite child.
And you can imagine why. I mean, we have 460 or so members running 8,600 or so shops, and there's no way I'm going to pick out one of them. They're all at one level or another doing a wonderful job, and I would commend them all.
I think that's a very fair enough response. Thank you. If you'd like to speak about your team or people who have helped you within the sector, that's also a space for this.
Sure. So one thing I guess I ought to add is the extent to which I did when I joined in 2015. I didn't know anything at all about charity retail. And the support of especially Susan Meredith, actually, and Julia Edwards in my team, who joined. Susan's been in CRA forever. Julia joined a few months before me. Their support in particular, helping me understand what goes on in charity retail, has been superb. But also, I've been lucky to have a really, really supportive board, and all the other people that worked in CRA over the last 10 years have been amazing too. We're lucky to have a very, very talented bunch of people in our team, and also very supportive of my limited efforts to help the sector. I'm just very lucky to have been involved with all of those people, and it's a great thing to look back on. Well, I'm not looking back on it just yet. I will look back on it in a few months' time.
Yes, when you're relaxing somewhere on a sun lounger with a cocktail and some sun. Robin, thank you not only for joining us today, but for the years of leadership you've given to the charity retail sector. You've made a huge impact, and we wish you all the very best in your retirement, but not now. You've still got a little bit of way to go. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn at Charity Shop Chat and at the Charity Retail Consultancy. Leave us a review and share it with someone who cares about the future of charity retail. Follow the CRA at We Love Charity Shops.
Yep.
I think
Thank
that's
you.
it, yeah. So that is all from us today. But as always, charity shops are full of stories and we love sharing them with you. So until the next episode, bye.
Bye.